Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning for those of you that are further on to the West Coast. Thank you very much for coming to our webinar today. My name is Tim Noka. I'm one of the people that helps to run ProTech, and I just wanted to take a moment or two to introduce our presenter today, Ken Wenzel. Ken has been in the IT industry for a number of years, has experience with several different integration tools that will be listed right there on that slide. This is some of the bullets of background of Ken. Several different OBIEE repositories also. Ken has been messing with big data here over the last few years and goes back into database experience into the beginnings of a lot of those databases that you see. Has data and dimensional modeling experience also. Ken spends most of his time these days doing consulting along with education and training. We greatly appreciate that he has come on board today. Just a couple of rules of thumb. You can put questions in the question area at any time that you want. We're going to take breaks a couple of times in the presentation today for Q&A. Myself, again, my name is Tim Noka. I handle the virtual training parts of ProTech. That's why I get in and get the opportunity to introduce any of these virtual webinars that we do. And with that, Ken, I will go ahead and pass the microphone to you. Thank you very much for your time and efforts in putting this presentation together also.
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I want to move to our agenda that will give you the high points of what we plan to cover. The subject of business intelligence is huge. Lots of pieces, lots of parts, lots of words. The idea this afternoon is to give you an overview, the main ingredients, how they are used, what the motivation is, what the priorities are. So we'll look at business intelligence defined. We'll then go into the base or starting point of data warehouses, just the basics so you can get an idea about fact and dimension tables. And so here's some of the terminology, some of the philosophy. At about 20 after, we'll have a question and answer break for a few minutes. If you have anything, you can put it in the chat area and we'll cover it. If we can't cover those, we'll handle those at the end of the session and distribute those in summary. After our Q&A, we'll look at tools. Microsoft has a wide variety of tools. We're going to include SQL Server, SharePoint, Performance Point, and also look at MDX, multi-dimensional expressions, a little bit of BIDS, Business Intelligence Development Studio, and Report Builder. So just as a subset of them, but it's a reasonable set to cover in our time this afternoon. Following that will be Oracle, targeting mostly on OBIEE, which stands for Oracle Business Intelligence Enterprise Edition. After that, we'll have Q&A again. And then demo as time allows. We may intersperse it that after the tools actually show it then and not put it all to the end. That way we can manage our time effectively. So if you look at page 4, business intelligence defined, putting a simple sentence to this is our goal. And that's what I have on page 5, a couple of sentences that says what business intelligence is. Made up of primarily 2 parts. Applications, this can be tools and business applications written by developers in Java and .NET for gathering, storing, loading, and converting the data into a form that the enterprise user can take advantage of to make better decisions for running the company. The background is based on volume of data, years of data that you can discover trends. You can do data mining to find undefined data, parts and pieces of data that through algorithms actually give you more business decision-making power than just the raw data. So leveraging that data store, which would be either a data warehouse or in some cases transaction databases, you can then go on to build repositories, cubes like Microsoft and Oracle both use, that allows the business executive, the data analyst, that power to be able to build reports, dashboards, and be able to look at the data very quickly. Data is growing faster than ever. I don't even know the rate that it is today. You'll hear about big data MongoDB, which stands for humongous DB, billion row table. There's a lot of data, and it's doubling even faster than before. So as we look at that second bullet, trying to come up with the systems that make it readily available for everybody is the challenge. Looking at the tools so that the right people can get the right data, and even look into that data with a data mining strategy that says what's hidden. What are the combinations of the pieces that we don't know about through algorithms that we can come up with to make intelligent decisions about our enterprise. So there's forecasting, there's statistical analysis, and then to top all this off would be your tool set. Things as simple as Toad data point. It allows you to go in and issue your script, work with SQL, or something as easy to work with as performance point or OBIEE. So as we look at these applications, we're trying to establish, very much similar to traditional applications, the requirements. What do we need to do to meet that end business formula? The difference here is we want to let it open-ended, though, so people can do what ifs. They can go in and examine which way they'd like to work with their data. I remember the very first time I was asked to go do and it was by mistake, somebody asked me to come to do a data modeling course. And I said, sure, I'll be glad to. I arrived and they said, yes. Well, some of the questions, though, before I went, I said, what are your local views? What paths of queries will you want? Oh, we don't know. I said, you don't know? Yes, we don't know. We want to go in any way and every way, and we haven't even thought of some of the ways. This was back when analytics was just being introduced. So that was a big switch. So as we dive into this, you can carve it into smaller pieces. You can have small subsets for groups, organizations, departments, areas of business, and localize it just that way. So you can have it centrally organized through a staff like information technology, or it can be driven by the user. There's a variety of ways to approach it, just like regular project work. So as we look at this, we're trying to answer these types of questions, and it primarily goes back to the newspaper: who, what, when, where, why, and how. But the history is key. There is a portion of this that is time-based. So if I wanted to go back and look at my sales over the years and did analyses on what is selling, what makes the most sense for me to go forward with, I've got it. I can do the analytics to see how the trends are working. If I'm in the grocery store business, I can see how sales are. I can look at my promotions and see what the difference is that they made. Did it pay off or not? So that what happened, when it happened, very key. That was one of the new things introduced, this time-based, that hadn't been in traditional applications. So as the little fox or the little coyote says, that just scratches the surface. As we dive deeper into this, we will ask data-related questions, and we'll have a variety of audiences to come up with this. As far as from a technical standpoint, looking at modeling, well, conceptual, logical, physical still apply. But there's other parts of this when it comes to building things called cubes. A cube is metadata stored that tells you about your data, your history. And we'll see that coming up in a little bit. So we're trying, once again, determine your audience, then make the data available to them, and key, high priority, make sure it's accurate. Enterprise data comes from a lot of organizations and a lot of sources. Nothing worse than going to a meeting and people pulling data from different spots that does not match. So cleansing is a huge part of business intelligence. If people are going to make decisions, we really have to make sure it's accurate. We don't want to duplicate data. We want to make sure it's polished and ready to go. So some of the pieces, key performance indicators, metrics, measurements. How are we doing? Now, a KPI, I'm sorry for that acronym that kind of slipped in there, but it stands for Key Performance Indicator. And it is going to be a lot of times a graphic as simple as a stoplight that says red, we're doing not expected, we're doing bad. Yellow, we're borderline. Green, everything's fine. And the tools come with those out of the box. short story. We did one particular consulting engagement, and we told the person, the executive vice president, here's what they could get for their dashboard. His question was, that stoplight, can we make it blink? We said, well, we could, but it's the difference between taking it from performance point that comes with it automatically, which we can have to you tomorrow, and it doesn't blink, and 3 months to put together the low-level code to make it happen. He said, make it blink. So, as always, there's automatics that come with the tool set. There's automatics that come with the applications. You may have to adjust those. So you have alerts, monitoring, actions. A dashboard is a series of charts and graphs that we'll see. Scorecards comes back to including one or more key performance indicator. Online analytical processing, OLAP, says we want to put this data into a cube, very much like a mathematical cube. And what that says is we can, it's called slice and dice, you can search with it. And we'll get into that more in a little bit. So if we look on my page 9, we can see Oracle's approach. That at the bottom you have your sources. Notice down there OLTP and OLAP, both. Above that there's a server and then the presentation piece. So if we compare that with our Microsoft side, there you can see SQL Server at the bottom, again through OLADB, being able to talk to Oracle or DB2 or another database. On top of it, you have SharePoint with Performance Point and reporting services that work with that data. The very good news about all these tools, they work very nicely together. As the versions are released on, there's more capacity and they become simpler. So let's take a look at data warehouses. Where it started out, well, they had a need for a lot of data and they wanted to see the trends over recent years. So a warehouse can be operational databases, OLTP. A lot of financial organizations use that. Or you can go into, as I mentioned, the cube, which takes additional work to put the metadata together, primarily building up this information. In the early days, decision support systems were what we first heard about, and it was primarily making decisions, and it's been evolving and being changed throughout the years, as the time frame shows here. So we're trying to help the knowledge workers to conduct these analyses so they can make decisions. Now it's a matter of how do you take your corporation, your organization, and get it to this spot. It takes time. There are two primary philosophies. Kimball, which has the data mart approach, saying we were going to build small pieces of data, small areas of data, and grow that together, bottom up, where we will denormalize that data, make it very comfortable for the end user to get it, so they don't have to understand joins, SQL, etc. So that's one style. William Inman has a different style, says we will normalize, we will do it traditionally, and again, it's subject-oriented, it's integrated, so two different styles. What I've seen in the industry is mostly Kimball, but that can vary. Now these subjects on page 17, well, sales, for example, or production, warehousing, or I should say warehouses where it's stored, customers, anything that's important along the lines is grouping of entities. And we're trying not to exclude anything. We want the records of history. We want, even when we're loading this data, we want to know where it's coming from. So if you look at it, you can have a variety of sources for this integration process. Integration where we tie it all together, we make sure it matches and is polished. Now I give you some of those steps as far as encoding, looking at the physical attributes of data, converting. As you can see here, the upper right-hand side, I may have a variety of designations in my company for male and female, 1 and 0. We might come down for measurements. As you look through balances, they're all over everywhere. Descriptions, so that's part of that transformation. So tools, service mix, Camel, open source. SQL Server integration services allows me to work very nicely, pulling from various sources and giving various destinations. And then IBM WebSphere Process Server with WebSphere Integration Designer. So, by the way, the little person down there at the lower right is somebody showing fear. I'm sorry, it's the only thing I could think of that maybe would bring a smile to the group. So these are time variant, very important to know what period it's covered, and non-volatile. The data will be kept in a consistent state. So as we look at this operational data, basically usually it's transaction oriented, so it has to be kept around in a warehouse. Now, I'm picking up speed a little bit because I'm seeing my timing, so as far as questions go, we might be able to dive into that a little closer. But our top-down, that's where you plan the development from the beginning. Global business needs. You do your traditional investigation in advance for the whole enterprise. So you can tell that takes more work than bottom-up, where you incrementally, whoops, sorry about that, you incrementally do a data mart, one group, and add more as interest in the organization takes place. That way, it's proof of concept. You can prototype, show how it comes together, but you would want to try to have something like conformed dimensions, conformed definitions. So as I add them, we don't have a big ripple, changing what we have already. So here's your single layer, taking that operational data, having the middleware, being then available to reporting tools or OLAP tools, online analytical processing. Now, the two-layer, you have tools in the middle where you extract, transform, and load. Still giving you the same results down here. I've added in data mining, where you discover more about your data along the way. So there's quite a few benefits, and we've talked about that already a little bit, but primarily performance is a consideration when we're working with billions of rows in tables. When we're doing searches on multi-dimensional models, that's where multi-dimensional expressions come in, as which Microsoft promotes, MDX. So this data mart is just a group. It might be for an area, finance, things like this. So I give you some of the terms on page 30 that I think are key. Fact tables, these are the search criteria. I'm sorry, these are the measurements. Dimensions are the search criteria. And then measures are what we want to store. Okay, so I'm going to pause here and give it back to Tim to see if there's any questions. We're right at 20 after.
I appreciate that. There are no current questions, so just a reminder to everybody that's here, if you have any, go ahead and fire them into the question area, and we will break again at 40 minutes after the hour for any Q&A that may come up in the meantime. Thank you.
So we'll expand this a little bit. Always in a presentation, you put together what you think you need, then you start talking about it even as you practice it. Different things pop up. But as I mentioned, these areas are critical to get an understanding of for the warehouse. So the fact, large number of columns, denormalized, that has what you're measuring within it. Amounts. What were my sales for the last 10 years? They grow very large, millions of rows, billions of rows, and they are updated from time to time. Now, some warehouses go to the extreme of real time. They need that data immediately. So with technology, there's a variety of solutions. Now, what happens is there's keys in these fact tables that relate to dimension. And if we come down to a dimension, primarily, the easy way to explain this is a dimension table is a search criteria. So if I want to search by product, by customer, by last year, I would have a dimension for each one of those. And what happens is you come up with a star where you have one block in the middle, and which is your fact table. And then around that are your dimensions, and that's the star. So it answers what happened, when did it happen, where did it happen, and these are small tables. They rarely change. They're consistent over time is what we want to be able to refer back to. Now, from there, you can even have hierarchies. As natural hierarchies appear, organizations. Chart of accounts, those are the natural hierarchies. Locations, like state, maybe region, marketing area, zip code. Times, we are all time driven, year, month, day, semester, hours, minutes, seconds possibly, depending on the type of business you're in. And then at the very top, products, where I have categories, subcategories, etc. Now this measure, we mentioned already, these can be computed facts, they can be aggregated, averaged, because these are the numbers that are important to people, important to the business. How did we do this? How are we doing? Over history, what's our trends been? How can we improve the business? There's our motivation. Now, along the way, you may want to take a snapshot of these, and that's where a materialized view comes in, or an aggregated table. And what that means is I can build these summaries and have them available. So it's fast, and I don't have a lot of time for the executive required to wait until that information is available. So that's where you really want to polish your data and make sure that it's fast and successful. So this idea of the star, I might have a series of dimensions organized around the fact. So if I have equities, I may have time, stock, brokerage firms as far as the dimensions go, and they would be my search criteria into the centralized equities data table. All right. Now, snowflakes, well, it extends the star slightly. As I show in the middle of this page, if you have city, state, country, and it's repeated, it can be normalized. And what that means is it can be taken out. The duplicate information can be reduced to a single row in another table. What has to happen is that has to be combined then with the original table we took it from. And in a lot of cases, that would require a join. Well, executives may not be worried about it, may not be interested in understanding that. So that's why it's key to know your destination before you even start this whole process. Well, who's going to use my data? What will they know? And how can I make it productive for them? So I mentioned Cube earlier. Multi-dimensional online analytical processing, MOLAP. Well, there's relational, ROLAP, then there's even hybrid. There's a variety of these, but you can see a cube on the side, and if we take a look at this in our shipping scenario, we have a time, we have a location or a source, and we have a route. So we have the criteria here to search from a variety of aspects. 125 different ways on one script to be able to build it. Now, if we took Microsoft, for example, MDX, which I mentioned earlier, is a way to put together search criteria on cubes that is a lot easier than we've seen with SQL. I plan to demonstrate that just a little bit for our technical audience that shows, wow, here's the difference. So we'll see that coming up. But cube processing, wonderful capability. It's more dimensions. Usually we're interested in rows and columns when we're looking at spreadsheets and traditional tables. Well, this cube pre-stores the summaries that we need and allows us to do this type of searching. Oracle, well, I know for sure Oracle and Microsoft both support it in their products. In fact, OBIEE, I can come from there and talk to SQL Server cubes. It's available. All right, so our Microsoft tools, this is where I was supposed to be on our first break, by the way, but we're, we're getting there. The Microsoft tool set that we'll take a look at starts with SQL Server. Trusted, been around forever. And as you can see at the bottom, has reporting, integration, and analysis services in addition to the database itself. SharePoint uses it as its storage location, even if you're not doing business intelligence. But there is reporting services, there's Report Builder, and then there's the SharePoint/Performance Point piece. So database is very important because that's what's going to be the basis to pull our data from. That's our store. So we have to have that in place. Many organizations have all of them. SQL Server, Oracle, DB2, etc. So then it's a matter of how do they talk together? How do we get them to blend is one of the challenges. So as we look at it, this shows you a little more of that tool set. Report Builder, reporting services, Excel comes in very strongly, Excel services. In fact, they have something called Power Pivot for doing extremely large table calculations, very much like you're used to in Excel. And even at the top, Visio services that provide charting capabilities. You'll even see workflow, combination of items that this tool set will let you do. Beyond all of this, our SharePoint Server, well, I'll give you a little more detail coming up as far as what the services provides. Whoops, I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. As far as diagrams, helping pictures to having pictures to help understand your data and understand your environment. Excel, what else can you say? Is there anybody that doesn't use a spreadsheet? Well, in analytics, where we're looking at measurement, it's critical. So, and Excel services is built into SharePoint so that it's a natural extension to the web. I can have my spreadsheet on the web available to everybody. It can be updated and deployed without email. So great for collaboration. Now, as we move from there, Power Pivot, I've talked about before, it's an add-in for huge data sets. Now, the new one that I didn't mention too much already was our Performance Point services. This was lately integrated as of 2010 to be included as SharePoint to make it simple for doing business intelligence, putting together dashboards and integrating your reports with key performance indicators and charts. Now, let's see if there's anything else with this, but primarily it helps you generate the MDX queries behind the scenes. The Microsoft tools build the scripts so that the business user, the non-programmer type, can get at the data and they can build their own reports and charts. As I mentioned, dashboards, scorecards, reports. So how am I doing? There's your scorecard. And then being able to look at the detail. For example, from IIS to SharePoint makes it very easy to see your documents. So I've got that as VMs, as I promised. Towards the end, if we have time, I'll pull that in. But I wanted to make sure I covered the items before I get into demo mode. I could be here for days. It's a wonderful tool set and very powerful. So I'm going to move on from there. Report Builder does as it says. Helps you build reports. It's Microsoft Office-like in nature, downloadable, free. You get spark lines that are little charts that says, how are we doing? And maps, aggregates, everything. It all works very much integrated together. Okay, now as we look at Oracle tools, well, I think the timing is good. Let's bounce out here and take a look at Microsoft. How's that? As you can tell, Microsoft is out here in this nice island for everybody to see. And right here is a sample of Business Intelligence Center in SharePoint. And as you look to the side, there's the information. Now, it's very nice and fluid here. As you look at it, it says, okay, I want to look at key performance indicators. On the left side, you see the symbols, as I mentioned before. If you want reports, as I've mentioned, with Report Builder, they can be put here also. I can also use Excel services. So there's my spark lines that I was just mentioning. And then finally, dashboards, kind of a combination. So if we get into the ingredients, this is where I like to go. If we look at all the stuff, here is, and if my SharePoint site is behaving today, it will pull up the backdrop that is supporting this. And you can see, well, one area right here. performance point content. And if we look there, well, you can see that there's, for our friend AdventureWorks Warehouse, there's history. There's the KPIs on how we're doing. There's a scorecard that has some of those KPIs in it. There's some reports, some filters, and even a dashboard. So it helps me organize very nicely if I come up and just wanted to see something simple or wanted to give a link to an executive. I could come to this spot, come into dashboards. Again, the executive wouldn't have to do this. I could just give them a link and give them a link to this page. And we should, there we go, wrong click. The charts that says, how are things? We've got a problem right here. We're down 61%. Oops. So as an executive, I don't have to go write the report. This gives me, first thing on my desk, what's going on, the symbols. Over here to the right, well, here's a little grid that, notice, if I want to, I can drill down. I can see what the detail is, and that's part of the dynamics of the tool. So where this all comes from is a little thing called a dashboard builder right here. And you can pull any of these up as you'd like, very much like the Office tools, as I said before. There's a chart, and it's done with a little report. There's building the key performance indicators, and just a variety of those. That there's a beginning of a scorecard. Now, as we drill further, or even if we start over, where did this all come from? Somebody had to build the cube. Somebody had to come in and put this together. So in bids, or data tools, as it's currently called, I come in and put together the pieces that you're seeing right here. I put the dimensions together, my search criteria, all right? Even have data mining structures. I put my measures together so that I can build these cubes. Now, taking it the next step, and these steps are in any order. I thought about primarily from the top down to the DBA level is where we're heading. We saw business user, we saw business, or I should say more power business user in the dashboard. Now we're into very much data analyst, database administrator maybe, or somebody that knows really data modeling well. And then finally, the DBA now, or the programmer. As we come in here, I thought I would show you some simple comparisons for those technical in our audience. There's an SQL script from AdventureWorks that we're saying we want the internet quantity. There's your amount. Now, that same thing written in MDX is right over here going, oh, we select measures internet order quantity on columns, we get the same thing. So your first look at this MDX, multi-dimensional expressions, it is built into Microsoft, but it has slightly different syntax. The big thing comes when I want to go after more data. Let me come up here to my MDX2 to show the result. I want to show the mountain bikes as it was from 2007 compared to 2008. So you can see selecting up here with member, there's my set that I want to cross with this set from 2007 to 2008. Now I don't have the time, I wish I did, to take all that detail apart, but what I'd like you to notice is this. See this size? If I were doing this in SQL, here is the equivalent size. So it does give you quite a bit of power and capability. It's not totally a replacement for SQL, but it does show you what the potential is. So as far as the tools go, you've got SharePoint, as we've seen, for presentation, for organization. You've got Performance Point Dashboard Builder for helping to put that together. I did not include Report Writer because of just time constraints. You have the Development Studio for putting the detail together, and then we're down on the database here, both doing SQL and MDX queries to resolve any particular what-if scenarios and background that would be fed into our dashboard. The short cycle, this is what the tools like Performance Point and Report Builder does for us behind the scenes. So you don't have to be real technical in MDX to use cubes. It will help build it for you. All right. I'm a little bit ahead, about 10 seconds, but let's turn it back to Tim, see how those questions are going before I move on to Oracle.
I do have a few questions and a comment. The first one is at the end, please list products mentioned. So I want to put that in your mind for the possibility that we could either do that or make it part of follow-up. Okay. The second question is, what is the most popular BI software? And they threw out a guess. Is it IBM Cognos?
Well, on that, that's relative to the person who you talk to, for sure. And the one that I run into the most is Performance Point in SharePoint. That's why I included it and used it as part of the demo. But I hear about Cognos. I have not had that much exposure to it or hear that much about it. But tremendous amount of SharePoint. And then secondly, OBIEE, which is coming up in just a little bit.
All right, very good. Thank you. Next question. We have a database with tables in SharePoint. At what point do we need to move the tables to a data mart? And what functionality will we lose by doing so?
Well, you may not need to move them to a data mart. A lot of organizations and companies keep just a second set of what we call transaction tables and run their analyses from there. So I would look at the volume that you have and that whole situation before I'd say, well, you have to have this physical new dimension/fact combination. So volumes are important. That'd be the one thing. The number of users that comes into the volume equation again would be another fact that goes into that, or another determining consideration. So once you know that, that'd be the next step to go.
Okay, very good. The last one is a comment. It says, so far this is, and I promise as I tell you this is nobody that we know. So far this is a great presentation, wish it was presented a little bit slower. Hope you can understand, sir, that we have a time constraint. And he says that he's glad that the slides are coming for review. Bearing in mind, of course, this is an education and training company that's giving you this presentation. We could go on for weeks at a time as far as this topic matter is concerned. And before I give it back to you, Ken, well, hang on a minute. I was just going to say for the audience that if you do have any questions, please go ahead and send them into the question area. Anything that we do not get done by the time the webinar wraps up at the top of the hour, we will document the questions and Ken's answer for you in our follow-up to you. And I got one while we've been talking, and it says, what is the difference between Performance Point and Power View?
I don't know Power View, so I'd have to research that. I'll be glad to, and I think that's something that would be good to know. So I will follow that up, Tim, in our response after the class.
All right, very good. And they keep coming here a little bit, so I have another one for you. What other advantages are there in using Cube versus traditional besides having shorter code?
Oh, just the what-if processing and the analytics of, number one, determining your metrics and being able to ask a variety of questions that's just real tough to do in traditional column row formats. When you put in the hierarchies, the pre-stored hierarchies, it just makes your data more robust and more useful to your business people. They don't have to do all the combinations of SQL to put it together. They can rely on what people have designed in, along with do some pretty random capabilities as far as random requirements, fulfilling random requests from the business to determine how they're operating. So yes, it's almost parallel to your traditional requirements gathering for a database. Dimension side has some more questions, of course, like how long do you plan to store this, and what are those hierarchies so that we can leverage it. But just for example, analysis services for SQL Server, to go through that particular process to teach it is 5 days. So there's a lot of questions and a lot of steps that go in that. But I appreciate that question. That's real good. All of them are. Thank you. Anything else, Tim?
I do have one. I don't know if you want to continue to spend time on Q&A or roll on, and this will be part of follow-up.
Let's see. If it's one more, let's see if it's a quick one. Otherwise, I may have to follow up.
I'll go ahead and give it to you. It says, are the reporting capabilities you showed in the SharePoint demo of the base SharePoint contract?
Oh, that's great. And the reason I'm laughing is there's so many variations on it. I would say with Enterprise SharePoint, you should get that. But I would contact Microsoft for the exact definition. They can vary so much. Foundation SharePoint, I don't think will have that. But I will follow up with that. I think that's an excellent one that I should have a summary on, so let's include that in the follow-up list too. It's always a challenge on which one should I get, and I'll be glad to address it. Okay, thank you, Tim. We will come back now and switch gears just a little bit. Same idea, same thought, different vendor, slightly different approach. Behind it all, though, we've got data. Oracle was my first database. I was with it before DB2. I enjoy Oracle's attitude as far as performance goes. I've drank the Oracle Kool-Aid. Again, is what as far as my experience has been. All the database vendors have to compete well, but in order to stay in business, period. So just like when somebody asks you which database or which PC you should have, a good one, and huge questions on which way to go. But if we look at Oracle's Business Intelligence, they have a suite of tools. OBIEE is the one that I mentioned that I'll show you just in a little bit. And primarily they have dashboards, as you see on my page 49. Graphs, the same thing. It is web-built. It is web-created. The one thing that Oracle adds to their stack is something called a repository, which is a little bit different, a little more complex than the Microsoft side to set up. So you can work with SQL Server cubes, you can work with SQL Server databases. I gave you some of the technology down here to the left as far as even Teradata comes in. As far as database speed for warehouses, hats off to Teradata. It is a warehousing database. As you saw, though, from my list, I'm aware of it, but no actual experience with it. I have several customers that use it that it's been around the longest for data warehousing. So Oracle hooks well into that. Now, as we look, and this is in case there's birds on the wire and I couldn't show you the demo, this is showing you Oracle's look as far at the tool base. There's building up some dashboards, and over here is showing the hierarchical nature of navigation and some of their icons. Primarily this repository is where you set up your definition. You have a physical, logical, and then a presentation view. And then you can proceed on through the web. This all runs on top of WebLogic. It is an enterprise, Java enterprise application, of course, built with the Oracle database underneath of it all. So on page 51, you can see the starting place is this repository. And that's where that presentation, the business model, and then the physical side is developed. We take this repository and then feed it into the OBIEE tool. So if you look at the dashboard, the idea is no programming, no technical programming language. It does take a little bit of come up to speed time to understand how to navigate. Oracle has had a tradition, even back to the days of Oracle Forms and Reports, of having their own user interface design. So it's not Microsoft, and that's why they're different companies. But you can see it has charting here too, as you'd like to pull it in, and the graphs. So underneath Oracle Fusion applications, that's the middleware, that's the WebLogic, that's the Java Enterprise application that helps make it all run. So let's see. Let's bounce out here just for a little bit. We'll go to a different island over here. Oracle is more tropical. I didn't know. I thought it might be this time during the day by the time I got done, so the sun is setting, I guess. Anyway, as we look at this, there is the home of OBIEE. So you can see how it's organized, analysis on the left, and what you've recently worked on, period. And then across the top, you can build dashboards, and you can get logged out for not using it for a while. So we'll just pop that back in, and it restarted. So the nice thing about Oracle, it comes with a pretty good stack of sample data. We'll see how my database is doing. It might have gone to sleep by now too, since I haven't been working with it. That's why I give you these different views, just in case. This is where I am building a report. All right, very, very nicely organized with a GUI. There's your little icons. As you hover over them, it should give you the relative information about what it'll do. Like a new view, a new layout, new columns, and then you can come back over to the details, may have me log in again, and drag over like your customer regions, products, your baseline facts that were right over here in our subject area. So that's how, for example, under customers, you can just open this up and say, oh, I'd like to pull over the region information, like right here. So this customer region 50 came from this spot. Click and drag, click and drag. Then as I am at this area, I can say, well, I'd like to do an ascending sort. I think my mouse will cooperate. So I say, okay, there's my ascending sort. Let's go try it out. You click the results, and now it should be ascending. So you didn't see any code, and that's the nice news. The one thing, though, I do have to be somewhat savvy and know where are all these pieces, and so it takes a little bit of a time. Now, behind the scenes, let's see, I've expired here too. So we will come back into our middleware, and this is where OBIE is running on WebLogic, and you can see that it's an application all to itself, showing you that everything's up and running. Depending on the day and the powerful PC or not, you can get a few reds going on here because this is a large application. Now, from there, so this is the application, OBIE, and then as we drill down, here is the actual server, WebLogic, that has it as its application. So as you look at it, I'll log in one more time, and you can get an idea of what's been deployed. There's the low level. Now, what I'm not showing is the Oracle database this is hooked up to. But that's in the background that's storing all the data that we're looking at right up here. So OBIE, and again, the reason for the presentation or the topics picked during the presentation was based on my teaching and consulting experience to hopefully help understand this thing called business intelligence, getting to the data that people need to run the business. This doesn't even scratch the surface on not only power of these tools, but others that are out there. Mostly my business is driven by people that need training, people that want training, popular products that ProTech sells as far as the training goes through their sales force. So they find out what you guys need, and then that's what drives my requirement, all right? So these have been two areas that have been very, very popular. Okay, looks like I've got about 5 minutes left. Let's come back and come to this presentation. And by the way, what I'm going to pass out, let's just come up here, or what will be provided at the end. I've got an analysis demo that takes you through the steps in OBIE, and then there's a performance point workshop that says, here it is, step by step, about 20 pages, that says, here's how you build these things from scratch. So that should be something very useful that you can get an idea and a little bit of comparison. I didn't put them together as a one-to-one comparison, but you can get a feel for the product at your own time and your own speed. So if we look at this, if I can get off that last page, this is a old picture that I retrieved from the archive showing the original disk drive with 1 horsepower. Well, Tim and I were talking just before the presentation. Just think where we've come in the last 5 years. look at the devices, look at the capabilities. And the forecast is just something we all run into. The web, within the next year or so, next couple of years, 80% of web access will be from handheld devices, smart devices. So who knows? We may have our warehouse on our wristwatch before you know it. But thank you very much for attending. People will always ask, well, what do you do next, or what's the next step? Well, some of the popular areas, that's why I put it up here, as far as training goes, SQL Server 2012 and BI. We actually include Performance Point in that too. Some of the reporting tools, Report Writer. So all of these can be configured, and they are modularized for your needs. And multi-dimensional expressions for developers. A popular one, Toad, for data analysts. This would be using the Toad tool. We originally captured a tool for Oracle application developers. It's now expanded into business intelligence. And then finally, SharePoint Performance Point. Very powerful tool, not only for business intelligence, but you can really leverage your investment with it. So with that, I will turn it back to Tim. Thank you again for attending, everybody, and I hope you have a enjoyable weekend.
And my thanks also to everybody for coming. My thanks to you too, Ken, for leading us. It's greatly appreciated. If I'm not mistaken, your next slide there has some 800 numbers on it that we might like to make sure is in front of these folks and on our recording. If you did find anything in here that you were intrigued about and you would like to follow up with, we have an account manager waiting to serve you at one of those two toll-free numbers. Of course, our follow-up information will be included in the stuff that we send out to you as a package. We have all of your email addresses from your registration. Thank you all very much. Hope everybody has a great day.